Welcome in everyone to Let's Talk Utes. We missed last week, but we're back to preview Utah's 3-0 non-conference start, and to talk about UCLA game coming up on Saturday. So let's jump right into it. So, in the non-conference, as everyone knows, we beat Florida at home, beat Baylor on the road, and then beat Weber State at home. What are your guys' takeaways from these three games?
Yeah, so obviously Utah's been dealing with a lot of injuries, which is going to be something we talk about multiple times during this video, I'm sure. But I think the defense has been better than I expected, while the offense has definitely been lacking behind a little bit where I would want us to be.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that the defense, like you said, wildly impressive. I didn't expect quite that good. I thought it would be good and improved on last year, but I thought it would be more good to great rather than elite as it's shown so far.
Mm-hmm.
The offense has been disappointing. It's been very vanilla without rising. Um, we just really haven't had any explosive plays besides the one to Muddy
Mm-hmm.
Parks to open the season, and that's really been the only explosive play this whole year. Um, yeah, so I'm pretty disappointed in the offense. It's really vanilla right now.
I think adding like Rise again, especially like Brant Keithy, hopefully later down throughout the weeks, hopefully this week, will help with that. I think just having Keithy in the middle, just being a threat where everybody has to be on him, or he's going to go for 200 yards like Kincaid does against USC.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that could open up the playbook a little bit more, allow Money Parks and Mikey Matthews and some of our more deep threats to get open on one-on-one coverages. And hopefully Cam or whoever the quarterback is at that point, maybe it's Nate, can get the ball to them. I
Yeah,
think.
something
Go ahead.
something that I thought was interesting was Coach Whittingham mentioned that Nate Johnson only has about 50% of the playbook available to him. And for someone that's been in the system for over a year, he should have 100% of the playbook available to him.
Yeah, completely agreed.
If the offensive system is so complicated that it takes you over a year to learn all of the plays, then something needs to change with that offensive system because that's just ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree with you. I'm a pretty big Ludwig supporter usually. I think he's a big step up from what we used to have in A-Rod. But having only 50% of the playbook available to you, that's kind of ridiculous. Like, what kind of plays are we dialing up? And if they're that complex, they clearly aren't working, considering we still have one of the worst explosive offenses in the country. So that just surprises me a little bit.
Yeah, I agree. We saw some pretty questionable plays from Ludwig in the Baylor's and the Weaver State games. I think versus Florida, he was pretty dynamic. He showed some grit, especially obviously with that first play deep pass from Barnes. But I agree. Like, it's crazy to think that it takes someone over a year and a half to get access to 100% of the playbook, especially
Mm-hmm.
someone with the skill set and the dynamic athleticism that Nate Johnson has, because I feel like that should him being that dynamic should open it up even more. I mean, there should be
Yeah,
plays that he should be the only quarterback in the room that can do that. Like, he's quicker than Cam, he's faster than Bryce. He has arm strength that can rival almost anyone in the country for a freshman. So it's crazy to me. Like, I agree 100%. I think.
yeah. There's a saying from the Washington offensive coordinator that formations are cheap and plays are expensive. And if an offense as good as Washington's, that's probably the best offense in the entire
Yeah.
country, can have a simple playbook and just run the same plays out of different formations that are effective, and you can learn it easily and you can perfect it, then there's no reason that Utah shouldn't be able to do that as well.
I think a
Mm-hmm.
prime example was the first play against Florida. Whittingham said, like, to start the end of the game, like, we usually line up in that formation and just do a little half-back dive behind the left tackle every single year. They line up in the same formation, but instead of a half-back dive, they send it deep, and look what happens.
Mm-hmm.
It works.
Yeah,
Speaking of that Florida game, I think what really is impressive is, especially after seeing what they did to Tennessee last week, is like giving up 13 yards to that rushing offensive attack is just going to be one of the most impressive things as the season progresses for Utah.
Yeah, that
Yeah,
That
win
was
has
super impressive to
aged
me.
extremely well. And it gives
Yeah.
me a little bit of confidence going into the rest of the year because if we were able to hold a Florida team with that strong of a rushing game to 13 yards, that's something honestly really special to be said about the defensive line and linebacker room.
Yeah, and I feel like outside of 2 drives in the Baylor game, we were incredible against the rush there too. They had 2 drives where they were kind of gashing us, um, running, but outside
Hmm.
of that, we held up insanely well, which is even more impressive when you consider the injuries we've been dealing to, especially the D line, which is the
Yeah.
most banged up area on the team.
Well, if you look at it, like Florida can be 6-1 by the time they play Georgia. You know,
Yeah, it's likely almost.
yeah, they like probably the toughest game is at South Carolina, maybe at Kentucky, but I'm confident that that Florida team can make it work. And truthfully, like I really only see 3 question mark games. I wouldn't say question marks. That Georgia is probably a loss, and probably at Florida, the Florida State game is probably a loss.
I
But
don't know. I wouldn't mark up either of those as a loss. The SEC is not looking as
SEC's down
invincible.
this
It's
year.
pretty down this year, and Georgia hasn't looked like incredible either by their
Yeah,
it's
standards
true.
as well.
what's really weird with the SEC is Graham Mertz, who in the Pac-12 may be the worst starting QB in the Pac-12.
Yeah.
Well, maybe he's better than the Stanford and Arizona State starters, but like he might be the 10th best quarterback in the Pac-12. Like he genuinely might be like the second or third best
Dude,
quarterback
after watching
in
that
the
Tennessee game,
SEC.
after watching that Tennessee game, I think he was grossly misused before transferring to Florida, and now that he has those weapons around him, I think he's a much better quarterback than people realize.
Yeah, I don't see why he can't be good. He looks like he reads the field
Dude,
well. He has good arm strength. Yeah, he's not the most athletic guy, but he's
he
done
made
well, I
some
thought.
plays out of the pocket versus Tennessee, though. He's athletic enough to get out of the pocket and make a throw on the run.
Yeah.
I mean, like probably Jackson Dart and Jalen Daniels, the only quarterbacks better than Graham Mertz so far this season in SEC, right?
Yeah, Jackson Dart is. I would probably take Jackson Dart and Jaden Daniels. I would take him as well. So yeah, I mean he's
Yeah,
probably
he's probably
third,
third.
which
Yeah.
is when you think about it crazy. And both of those other QBs are in the West, so he's in the
Hmm.
Yeah.
East. So
Well, I
It's
mean,
crazy to
yeah,
think about.
Florida wins out except that Georgia game, but
Dude,
and
I
Georgia
wouldn't count
maybe
it out,
loses
man.
one
I
or.
wouldn't count
I
that
know.
out.
I mean, if they beat Georgia, who else in the East is gonna compete for them to get into this SEC championship game?
yeah. The dirty
They
little
already.
secret of that game, Florida at Utah, was that Florida's defense was actually really freaking good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like they gave up one big deep pass and then they gave up one short field to Utah,
Hmm.
which was the Graham Mertz tipped pass pick at like the 10-yard line. So like outside of one deep pass and one short field, the defense only gave up one TD drive the entire game, and that was
Yeah.
that Nate Johnson drive that he took him down the field.
Hmm. Yeah. I
So like
mean,
yeah,
I don't know how you guys feel about this, but is Utah the most unknown team that has like 2 Power 5 wins? It's just kind of crazy to me because I feel like this season could still go any direction, and I wouldn't be that surprised. And we've already played 3 quality programs, and 2 of them Power 5.
yeah, I certainly agree with that because honestly, this UCLA game, I have no idea how it's gonna
Yeah,
go. You
same.
know, skipping
Yeah.
ahead a little bit. Yeah,
I think Utah being so injury like diminished is a disadvantage, but also an advantage because like a fully healthy Utah team, the last time you're going to see that is versus USC, and I mean that's not even this Utah team this year. Obviously, we have a little bit more dynamic receivers in my eyes with Mikey Matthews and Money Parks, and that could open up the field so much better for Utah.
yeah,
Yeah, one thing that I've been worried about through the first 3 games is the lack of a safety net like Kincaid and Keithy have been.
Mm-hmm.
I think
yes,
that's partly contributing to how poor our offensive output has been at times because we've never had a QB like a CJ Stroud, a Bryce Young, like these guys that are throwing downfield. I mean, part of that's due to play call. We don't call plays like that. But at the same time, I've really noticed that miss on those 3rd and 6s, 3rd and 7s. We used to always
Yeah,
be able to look for a Keithy or a Kincaid. Even those like 3rd and 15s, just we'd get 4 or 5 big plays out of those guys a game, and we just have not had a safety net like that at all this year.
I've noticed that as well because our third down conversion has been abysmal.
We used to be one of
Way
the best
worse
in the
than it
country.
was. Yeah, way worse than it was last year. Usually, Keithy or Kincaid, the ball was going to them on third down.
Yeah, I believe we
And
were
you
top
knew,
10 last year.
yeah, and
I
you
think we're
knew you were
ninth.
going to get, you knew
Yeah,
you were going to get, I don't know, 60% of them that you were targeting Keithy and
Yeah.
exactly.
Kincaid.
They
And
just
this
get
year,
open.
it's
They make
just,
plays.
everyone is just completely covered.
It
Something
feels
that
so much more risky this year every time we throw the ball. 'Cause it's like, oh, who is it going to? Are they going to be open? Is there going to be separation? Are they going to make the catch? Are they running the right route? Is the just
Yeah,
guy, especially Keithy and Kincaid, where it's like, okay, these guys have been here for 2 and 3 years. We know what they're about. Always on time, on target. They have huge catch radiuses. That's something not to be overlooked. Their catch radiuses
yeah.
are both extremely large. And just
I
having
think
that option.
Yeah. I think that the guy that's going to become that, maybe not this year, but certainly in the future, is Mikey Matthews. I think he just has a knack for getting open. And I think
Hmm.
that, while, Covey is kind of a one of one as far as like the punt returns and the kick returns go, like I think Matthews, like as a receiver, like stacks up to like what Covey was as a receiver, like already. And
Mhm.
Yeah.
so, like, I think that like there's a lot of potential there for him to become a major playmaker.
Well, I mean, someone we could. I was going to bring up for that exact scenario is Manir McLean. I mean, him and Nate had a pretty good connection. Again, it's against Weber State, so it's really hard to kind of judge that by in a grand scheme. But what I saw from McLean and Nate was like a connection that reminded me a little bit of that Cam and Keith and Cam and Kincaid. Obviously, not as elite, not as dynamic. Um, but if Manir McLean can be that guy, he's a big body target, converted from tight end to wide receiver. I mean, having Money Parks and Mikey Matthews be the speed guys, and then Manir McLean just being a huge body with Keithy running slant routes and posts would be great for Utah.
Yeah, McLean moves really gracefully as well. Like I
Yeah,
think he's a really good mover. Like he's very athletic.
I
Um,
mean,
I
you
think he's
saw.
gonna factor.
I saw. I think it was against Baylor. He had the ball in his hand. He made some pretty good moves with um to create some separation with the ball in his hand. So I'm excited for him. I hope he can contribute.
Yeah, I think he played really well against Weber. He had that early corner route that Nate just hit him
Mm-hmm.
perfectly in stride for like a 35-yard gain. He had that post route over the middle that we see Keithy run all the time
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
with Rising. That Nate
Absolutely
also,
love that route.
yeah, that Nate also hit him perfectly in stride, and then he had quite a few yards after the catch, and then he had that crazy catch along the sideline where he
Yeah.
went up and
That was
high
awesome.
pointed the ball, went up and high pointed the ball, and totally got taken out by the defender, but still held on to it. So that showed me a lot. That performance, I think
Hmm.
he really kind of came into his own.
And like
Okay.
speaking of Nate, he had some plays in that game that if our wide receivers just go for it or it wasn't a PI, I think his stat line looks a lot better.
Yeah. So let's go to the next slide, Landon. So yeah, Nate
Speaking of
Johnson
Nate,
is our next topic. We will talk about kind of, our thoughts on him, how he performed. What are your guys' initial thoughts?
Thoughts is he's performed good, but I wouldn't. It's hard to evaluate how well he can perform when he hasn't been given a ton of opportunities. Weaver was a
mm-hmm.
pretty bland playbook, but in terms of like actual quality minutes that mattered, he performed very well against Baylor and he performed very well against Florida, I would say.
I mean, over
Yeah.
150 total yards, 2 touchdowns, not turnovering the ball. I mean, versus Weber State. I mean, you can't really ask for more in my eyes. So I think he's played really well when he's given the reins to the offense. And then you kind of see in that Baylor game, I mean, the passing stats alone versus Baylor won us that game. I know 6 for 7, 82 yards, big whoop. That's from one single drive, maybe two.
Yeah,
And he
one
looked
drive.
like
And we hadn't had a spark or a breath of offense the entire game, so it really was a huge moment.
so. I think if Nate can be allowed to open up the playbook and kind of show off his skill set a little bit more, I mean, there's no ceiling for this guy.
Yeah, I think that Nate has been so good that even the coaches have been surprised, I think, because they gave him a very vanilla playbook
Yeah.
against both Baylor and against Weber, and he made the most of it. I think that he even shocked the coaches.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I do want to see what he would look like in an offense that maybe has more of a vertical passing element because he threw some good deep balls. He put that one
Yeah.
in to money, right on the money, but he obviously got PI'd that they didn't
Yeah.
call, grabbing his hand completely, but it was a perfect ball placement. I thought he threw one to Landon King in the end zone that if
Yes.
Landon King just stuck out his
Yeah.
hands, the ball might have fallen
Agreed.
right into his hands.
It was so perfect.
Yeah.
It's so frustrating.
He must not have seen the ball or it got lost in the
Yes.
sun because I literally feel like if he just stuck out his hands, it was right there,
Well, I think
like a
that shows,
perfect catch.
I think that goes to show like what Whittingham said. Like he doesn't have that much faith in the tight end room right now because
Yeah.
it's like if that was any other,
If that's
maybe
Kincaid, it's
any
a
other
touchdown
tight
He's
end.
catching
guaranteed.
that. Yeah, I guarantee
I will
that.
bet my life that Kincaid catches that ball.
I mean, I even
Yeah.
trust Vele in that spot.
Yeah,
Like-
I thought the first half play call against Weber was pretty decent because I thought
Yes.
Nate had the opportunity to hit a lot of guys in stride and while they were on the move, which I think is Nate's strength. The second half I was pretty disappointed because it was a lot of like sitting routes where people were kind of stationary, and Nate was expected to kind of find those people, and I think that he struggled a little bit more with that.
I think as a
so, yeah.
quarterback, as a fresh quarterback as well, it's harder to read those types of routes, all those different types of curls and like zone read type routes. It's a lot easier to have like one read on a defender, seeing who the safety helps with, seeing where their linebackers are playing. I don't know. I'm not a huge fan of those curl routes because it puts the ball in harm's way as well to good defenders, and we saw that a couple times against Weber State where I do think he had one or two balls that should have been picked off but got dropped.
Yeah. But like almost a turnover is a lot different
Yeah,
than like
it's
an
very, very
actual
different.
turnover. It's a very different thing. Like how many picks does Mahomes have dropped? So many.
Oh yeah,
There's so many.
at least half
I
of
just
them get dropped.
I just want to highlight one throw from this game that I thought was really, really good that probably doesn't seem like much, but that I thought was really impressive. And it was that screen pass to Mikey Matthews that Mikey Matthews took for like 40 yards with a great run
Yeah.
after the catch. That's a tough throw. He had a defender right in his face,
Yes.
and Mikey Matthews had a defender right on his back. He had to put that in the perfect spot where only Matthews could get it and not a defender. If you guys remember 2020, Cam Rising, his first start in 2020, the game that he got injured against USC, and we didn't see him again until 2021, he threw a pick on a play almost exactly like that, a screen, where he just floated it over the running back and a USC defender picked it off. And it's like, it shows you like that's not an easy throw. Like he had to put the perfect amount of touch on that to get that right to Mikey Matthews over the defender.
Well, and speaking of touch, I mean, when he doesn't need to put in touch, the dude has a cannon. I mean,
Yeah.
he has some zip to his ball and some plays that when they needed to. That slant route, especially in the Baylor game where Mikey Matthews had to kind of get up a little bit to get it. I mean, it was a little overthrown, but like it was right where Matthews could get it. I mean, it was perfect. I mean, it had a lot of power. Like I said before, like this, there's no ceiling to this man's potential. He has the skill set to be one of the most dynamic and better quarterbacks in the country and in Utah history. And I just hope he gets the tools to do that in the near future.
I have a point kind of going off of that. I've seen a lot of like people have this take where it's like, oh, like Nate may not have the highest ceiling as a passer, but like his athleticism will make it so that like he can be elite, And I just don't understand where that's coming from.
Yeah,
like
we don't really know
genuinely,
that yet.
Well, like genuinely, like what have you seen that makes you think he could not be an elite passer? Like think about it.
Nothing
He
so
has
far.
he has he has really really strong arm strength. I think he puts good zip on the ball. He has decent accuracy. The intangibles are really good. He's a leader.
I
His
agree.
feet are so still in the pocket. He is not just like an athletic quarterback where he's looking to just tuck and run if his first read is gone. He
Yeah.
sticks in the pocket and he keeps his eyes downfield. So like
Yeah.
yeah, the things as
He's
far
not
as like
afraid to
yeah,
take hits either to get a
he's
pass
not
off.
afraid to
He's
take
already done
hits.
it multiple times.
And so like
Well,
basically the only downsides I see for him as a quarterback just are due to a lack of reps. Like
Yeah.
I don't
yeah,
see that there's any ceiling or like anything that will make it so he couldn't become an elite quarterback throwing the ball aside from rushing.
I
Yeah.
mean, like my only complaint I've seen from Nate, especially passing the ball, was just the miscommunication with Money Parks on that route. I mean, but that will come with reps. You know, what is my wide receiver comfortable here? Is he comfortable being outside or inside? Obviously, Money went inside and Nate threw outside, or the other way around.
Exactly. It's
Um,
just like when you see someone like say like Bryson Barnes who like no matter how many reps, he'll never be an elite quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
Nate doesn't have that problem. He has all the
Exactly.
physical tools. The only thing he needs is reps and more time. That's all he needs.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he has 33 carries and 24 attempts on passing. Like he's barely scratched the surface, and he's already shown so much talent that like if Cam doesn't come back, I think this is season's a wash. But like we could still be very competitive with Nate Johnson as our starting quarterback,
Yeah,
especially
Yeah.
how many wins do you guys think we would get with Nate the whole year?
7th or 8th,
That's really
maybe
hard to
7.
predict, I think, just with how good the pack is and just how early it is still in the season. If I had to choose, I'm saying we have 9 wins, including bowl.
I could see that. Yeah, I would say 7 to 8 regular season wins
Mm-hmm.
for me is where I would go. And then if
Yeah.
they win,
I
obviously
think
that goes up
we'd
to 8 or
make a
9
bowl
total.
game. We'd make a bowl game winner with a 9 total, whether we win the bowl game or not. But
Yeah.
I think we did it 9.
Yeah, to me, this kind of reminds me of like Tyler Huntley's like 2017 or
Mm-hmm.
2018 year, where it's clear that he's not at his peak level yet. He's
Yeah.
still developing, but like all the talent is there. Like
I
every
Mm-hmm.
mean,
single intangible that you could possibly need is
Yeah.
there. He just needs the reps to put it together.
like probably the biggest gripe for me when Tyler Huntley was a quarterback was he looked to run before he passed the ball. And like you talked about earlier, Tanner, like Nate's already has gotten to that point where he has the ability to run better than any quarterback in Utah history, but he's still looking to pass first. And it's that just shows me that he's already at a point in his intangibles and his mindset that it took Tyler Huntley 2 to 3 years to get to.
Yeah, I've honestly been shocked when watching him as far as like that goes. That was pretty crazy to me,
He
like
does
how
seem
good he
very
was at keeping
poised
his
in the
eye
pocket.
downfield. Yeah.
Well,
And I mean,
that
it's
play,
exactly like we talked about. As soon as he got the full-time reps, the fumbling issues are completely gone.
Mm-hmm.
You
mhm.
know, because like he's totally used to like getting the ball now. The fumbling issues were just due to him being cold, you know, him not being in a rhythm.
Exactly.
Yeah,
I mean,
you know,
even look at Jaquindon. When Jaquindon came in for those like goal line reps, he fumbled like 2 out of 3 on the first tries. Like
Yeah.
or dropped the snap or something. It's just when you're not used to that situation, you're just not in rhythm.
Yeah. And even last week, our center put a ton of balls on the ground that Nate had to reach down for as far
Mm-hmm.
as the snap goes to get him, and he still was not at risk of losing a fumble. So I think that just shows like he's a gamer. Like he's gonna step up, and
Yeah.
he's cleared the bar so far. Like every bar that's been put in front of it, he's cleared so far.
Yeah.
oh yeah, completely exceeded any of my expectations
Yeah. Okay,
passing the
let's
ball,
talk about
especially.
the who the 2024 QB1 is going to be. I listed some of the options here: Nate Johnson, Brandon Rose, Isaac Wilson, Mac Howard, or a mystery transfer
Yeah.
quarterback. What is your guys' read on kind of the 2024 QB1 situation?
My read right now is that Nate's the front runner, but it still is completely open. Like if Rising comes back soon, which I think a lot of Utah fans are hoping he will, it's seeming like he will. Nate probably won't get much playtime for the rest of the season unless something goes disastrously wrong.
Or at least
I
at
would
the quarterback.
at least at the quarterback position. But you do need to remember that before Brandon Rose got injured, he was leading as the clear QB2. So I think they might go in on near equal footing, I might say, next season, with Isaac Wilson and Mac Howard being on a slightly lesser footing. And then, I
Yeah,
mean, if the QB room's not looking good, we'll bring in a transfer, I believe, but I don't think that will be necessary.
yeah. Some people might be noticing I didn't include Bryson Barnes here. It's no disrespect to Barnes. I just don't think he factors into kind of the long-term plans at quarterback at Utah. I think that he's a really good backup, but I don't think he really has much of a chance to start next year.
I think he's the perfect quarterback to come in to continue a lead if Utah needs that. You know what I mean? Against like a Weber State, against a team that we're up by 30. You know, he's not going to make any mistakes. He understands the offense. Just allow him to get the reps in. I would be very surprised if Bryson Barnes didn't transfer or did transfer. No, I would be very surprised if he didn't transfer. I just think it's time for him. He has another year of eligibility. Just go somewhere, get the quarterback one job, and live out your college football collegiate career with a bang, with a team that you could actually compete in. But for me, I think Nate Johnson will probably have the edge, even if Brandon Rose was the QB2 to start this year. I think in-game experience, especially for guys like Ludwig and Witt, is just too hard to overlook. And I think the 3 games that Nate has so far under his belt exceeds anything these other 3 probably could do, unless a transfer quarterback comes in with a ton of experience already. I
Yeah,
think Nate
I
has it in the bag as
I
of right.
agree. I agree with Landon, where I think that Nate Johnson and Brandon Rose are neck and neck right now,
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
because I think Brandon Rose was leading, and then Nate Johnson's play as of late has probably leveled with Brandon Rose. I think
Yeah.
that if Nate Johnson continues to play this year and maybe Rising misses a few more weeks and Nate Johnson continues to play really well, then he'd have a leg up. But as we stand right now, I think they're in a dead heat for who is going to be the QB1 next year. I'm talking a little bit about Isaac Wilson and Mac Howard. Isaac Wilson had a little surgery in his knee like a week or two ago to clean up, and he is rumored to need another one after the year that might take a significant recovery time. So I would expect Isaac Wilson probably redshirts his freshman year. I don't think
Mm-hmm.
that he will be the QB1. I think he's going to redshirt, learn the playbook, and in 2025, he's going to have a really, really strong shot, I think, to be the quarterback. Mac Howard, I think, is a little bit of a dark horse. We don't really know what we have in him yet. He's getting a lot of work with the scout team this year. But the same thing was true of Brandon Rose last year, getting a lot of scout team work. So it's
Mm-hmm.
possible that, with the development, Mac Howard comes into spring next year and can make it a 3-way competition between Nate, Brandon, and Mac.
Yeah, I mean, Brandon Rose, he was announced the backup like a month before the season, dude. Like, he definitely separated himself significantly. And I'm actually excited at that prospect of Nate and Brandon Rose being in a competition because I think it will just elevate both of their play.
Yeah.
So I'm excited
Ultimately, I
to see
want the
that.
best player to play.
Yeah, same.
You
I
know.
love Nate. I don't know. We haven't seen as much Brandon Rose, but dude, if he's the best quarterback, he should play.
In the spring game, he looked really good.
He
His
was by
arm
far
looks
the best
really
quarterback
strong.
in the spring game.
Yeah, his arm looks really strong to me. I think
Mm-hmm.
that he's kind of got that like gunslinger potential as
Yeah.
far as, being a really accurate, really strong arm
It might be
quarterback.
too early to say this, but I kind of saw shades of Bo Nix with Brandon Rose.
Yeah, I
Obviously,
can I can
it's
see that
one
a little
spring
bit.
game, but I feel like they have similar builds where they have a little bit of sneaky athleticism and strength, and they also have like a large arm, like great deep ball.
Yeah. Yeah, I
I
can I
think
can definitely see that comparison.
just to kind of like bounce off your points and play a little bit of like for Nate here. I think in the spring game, like the confidence just was not there for him. I mean, obviously he wasn't. He was battling for the quarterback 3 spot with Bryson Barnes. I mean, that would be hard for anyone.
Yeah.
But I think as soon as he got like the reins, like when Cam came up to him in that Baylor game, it's like, this is on you. Like, you got it. This is like, you're the number 1 guy right now. you saw him come in with a swagger that is hard to beat, and you see him in the Weber State game making a lot of great plays with his feet, a lot of great plays with his arm, and so
Yeah.
it's going to be hard. I think Brandon Rose is going to be really dang good. I'm excited to see who's going to be, and to kind of go back on Matt Coward as well. I mean, we've seen, especially with Lugwood and Witt, they really like that year in as the practice squad quarterback. Cam Rising did it. Brandon Rose done it. You know, it kind of gives them an opportunity to learn this IB too insane offense that Ludwig has implemented in this for Utah.
Yeah, I wouldn't judge Nate too much on the spring game because he was kind of nursing an injury during all of spring, which didn't really allow him to get a ton of reps. And I think that at this point it's just outdated. Like we've seen him against like actual teams and actual games, and like I would lean
I
towards
would disregard
those
the spring
plays.
game,
Yeah, I would
basically.
pretty much. For Rose, it's good information because we haven't seen anything of him besides that. But for Johnson, it's just outdated, I think, and doesn't
Yeah.
reflect who he is right now.
Yeah, I would just end my kind of whole take on this situation by saying I'd be pretty disappointed and pretty questioning of our coaching staff if we do have to bring in a transfer. That'd be a little bit strange after having a couple quarterbacks in development for a couple years in the program now. I don't know.
Yeah,
It'd be a little concerning to me.
especially if the offensive playbook is so difficult to learn, you literally can't do it in a year. Like it just would be
That
crazy
would
for
be
me
a
to
little
bring in
bit
a quarterback.
concerning to me if we have to bring in a transfer. That would show me that not all is well in the Utah offense.
Yeah. So let's go right now. Who, if you had to choose, who are you saying is going to be the 2024 QB1?
I think Nate will be QB1 2024.
What do you think, Ethan?
Devin Brown from Ohio State.
Yo,
That's a hot take,
That's
but
I'm just kidding.
there's a chance. There's certainly a chance. There's
I'm just
certainly
kidding.
a chance.
I think it's got to be Nate Johnson as of right now. What I've seen from him just kind of outshines anybody in the room at the moment, especially just because he has the in-game reps. But I
Yeah.
wouldn't be surprised if Brandon Rose does take that leap, especially. There's a reason why he was QB2 to start the year.
Yeah, I'm gonna go Nate Johnson as well. I think Nate, I would give him like a 50-50 chance to start. Brandon Rose, I'd probably give him 40%, and then I'd probably give Matt Coward and Wilson probably 10% together to
I'd agree with
be
that.
the guy. Okay, let's move on to the next thing. So position group confidence meter. We did this in the preseason, and I think at least for me, a lot of the rankings have changed drastically. So yeah, let's talk about it. Let's start with the quarterback. We kind of talked about that. What is your confidence meter through 3 games at the quarterback position?
Is this just relative to Utah and how we've performed, or relative to UCLA who we're playing?
Well, this is just relative to every other team in the country,
Okay, so
basically.
just how
Like
we've
how
performed.
confident.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll start off with QB. I'd give a 3 confidence level in QB. There's just so many unknowns. There's so many ways it could go. I mean, even if Cam comes back, does he look like himself? There's just so
Yeah.
much up in the air.
Yeah, there's too much doubt for this to really be that high of a number, I'm thinking. And it doesn't really reflect on the quality of player, it just reflects on the situation.
Yeah. I mean, I would be a 1 if Nate hadn't played, like, pretty well, like he's been playing. So,
For me, I'm definitely not that low. I'll probably go a 6 on the confidence meter because I think Nate has shown me enough that I think he has the chance to really break out, and I think that it's possible that he could play really, really well. And I think Rising is imminently coming back. So for me, it'd be a 6. Simply, it could go higher if Rising looks like himself when he's back. But as of now, 6. There's just too much up in the air.
I think 5. I kind of piggybacking on all your guys' other points. Nate's shown me enough where I'm confident where we can be competitive in almost any game this year. But if Rising comes back and he's 85% of what he is, I think we have a chance to be back-to-back Pac-12 champions. So I think a 5 is appropriate on my scale.
Yeah. Okay, let's move on to the offensive line. I think that this position, the confidence for me has definitely dropped in this group. I was
I agree.
sky high on them, and they've just been good, not elite like I thought they were. I think before the season, I was probably either a 9 or a 10. I thought it would be maybe our best position group, and they've just shown a little bit of inconsistency. Maybe it's just Jim Harding's famous slow starts on the offensive line, but
Mm-hmm.
still, I have less confidence now than I did then, although I still think it's a good unit, so I would probably go 7.
Yeah, going for me, I think I rated them a 9 or 10 coming into the season. I'm sticking with a 9. I feel really good about this unit. We've been able to run in basically every single game we've played this season. Well, we have been able to run in every game we played this season. Yeah, we haven't run for like 300 yards, but we had a rushing attack. They've protected the quarterback, and I think they're only going to get better as the season goes on, and usually we start much worse than this, just being completely honest. So I think this unit could end up still with an extremely high ceiling.
Something that like isn't talked about a lot for the offensive line, at least, is the constant rotation of quarterbacks to start the first 2 games.
Yeah.
I mean, you have to get used to a completely new cadence from a different player. I mean, you have to be able to be a lot more mobile with Nate on as your quarterback than Bryson Barnes. You have to protect the pocket for 9 seconds with Bryson Barnes as your quarterback because he's going to hold it for 10. So I think as the season progresses and they get used to if Nate's the guy or when Cam comes back, because all these guys except Spencer Fano is used to his cadences and the way he plays. I think
Yeah.
it's just going to continue to improve. They have dropped for me because they haven't been as disciplined as I've expected. There's been a lot of false starts, a lot of holding penalties. Some of them are a little iffy, especially on the holding calls. Um,
Yeah.
but guys like uh, not my what's his my right tackle. What's his name?
I
Keaton
can't
Bills?
remember. Yeah,
Not
maybe.
Bill's his left guard. I
Okay.
Anyways, he's one of our better guys. My brain just completely went blank, so I can't think of it. It's not my obviously he's injured. It starts with an M. Is it Mukafisi? No, I don't
Yeah,
know. Anyways,
Mokafisi.
Mokafisi.
yeah,
It's Mokafisi.
Mukafisi. He's had some games this year where he hasn't been as dominant as I hoped, and same thing with Keaton Bills. So they dropped to me. I'll probably give him an 8 here, but they were a 10 for me at the start of the year. So the expectations were pretty dang
Yeah.
high.
Mm-hmm.
Mokafisi in the Baylor game especially had quite a few penalties.
Mm-hmm.
Lamea in the Weber game surprisingly had penalties, and that for me is why I
Yeah.
dropped him because like against Weber we kind of were
Why are we
pretty
jumping? Why are we
inconsistent.
false starting against Weber? I don't
Yeah.
know. It's
Well,
just
but like we
dumb.
were like allowing pressure too, like pretty
Yeah,
frequently.
we've had
Which
trouble picking up the blitz, which I think could potentially be the quarterbacks. A lot of the time, the quarterback can sometimes orchestrate and call out what kind of coverages they're in, maybe who's
yeah.
bringing pressure. I don't
Well, I
think
mean
Nate or
maybe
Bryson have that ability.
that's
I think,
comp that's like new to
yeah,
playing center
Yeah,
that
because
like
center
couldn't pick out
has
the
a lot of that
guys
as
quite
well.
as well. Yeah, so like center's doing that a lot
so
I
too.
think
if
that could
Maya
be
comes
part of
back,
it.
when Maya comes back, I think that's gonna clean up. I think they're gonna be able to audible to and change schemes to
Yeah.
help with that as well.
Yeah.
So
Okay, let's talk about the running backs. For me, this is also a really big drop off in
Oh,
confidence level because I thought this was one of our strongest positions with Mekhi Bernard, Jaquindon Jackson, Jalen Glover, Chris Curry. But after the season ending injury to Mekhi Bernard and JJ just kind of looking like a glass man out there,
and
getting
injured
banged up
is
all the
yeah.
time, and Glover and Curry simply just not living up to expectations, I think. I definitely am dropping them. I'm probably a 4 just because I think the depth is really weak right now and
Mm-hmm.
the injuries are just stacking up, I think.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with a 4 as well. Coming into the season, I think I was an 8, but that was mostly because of Mekhi Bernard. I've always been extremely high on Bernard. He's a very athletic player, and he's just a utility weapon that does a lot for the offense. He's also an explosive player, which we're definitely missing. He's someone who is great in pass protection. He can catch balls, he can run balls outside, he can run balls up the middle. He definitely has the best vision of any of our running backs. And he was a big, big reason why I had the room rated as high as I did. And then
Yeah.
I expected Jaquindon to make definitely a leap with that athleticism and size. And then I expected Glover to also make a leap, as well as maybe seeing some Chris Curry action. But all we've really seen so far is just Bernard getting injured. JJ, I would say, has been a little disappointing. Jalen Glover's definitely been disappointing, other than a couple drives. And Chris Curry's just barely even played. So it's hard to
Yeah.
feel super confident in that situation.
Yeah, it just feels like they haven't really clicked yet. We really haven't
Yeah.
gotten that dominant rushing performance
Mm-hmm.
that we've expected. And like honestly, like Nate has been probably just as good as any running back in the room so far.
Yeah.
You know, as far as running the ball.
For me, it's kind of weird because I feel like a lot of the woes to the offense has to do with who's in the quarterback room.
Yeah.
I mean, when Nate Johnson was on the field for Florida, on the field for Baylor, the running game was completely different. Jalen Glover looked like a completely different man when Nate Johnson was the quarterback. So did Jackson. They just looked so much more rejuvenated. They have holes because they can't stack the box. And it's like, all right, Bryson Barnes not going to run this ball. We got to stop, create pressure, fill every single hole.
Yeah,
And that they couldn't do
exactly.
that with Nate. If Nate can pull that off and go for 70, and so it creates a lot more options for the running backs. I think we've seen that as Nate's took the reins in end of week 2. But I agree with the season-ending injury of Mekhi Bernard. They will drop. I think I'd have him at a 6 here. Again, I think with consistent quarterback play, the inconsistencies in the offense will improve.
Yeah, so what would you rank them as far as out of 10? I think me and Landon both did
6.
4. A
A
6?
6. Yeah,
Okay.
I'm a little bit higher on them just because I think it has to do with the quarterback play as well.
Yeah. So let's move on to the receivers. This is one that's actually risen a lot for me. The emergence of Mikey Matthews and the clear step up that Money Parks has taken make me feel, and along with, I think, really, really strong depth at the wide receiver room, make me feel a lot more confident about the receivers than I did. I think Money clearly looks like a better receiver. His routes are a lot crisper. Mikey Matthews has just been super dynamic every time he's touched the ball. Their stats don't look good because they simply just we haven't thrown the ball a lot. Versus Weber, we ran the ball 72% of the time. So their stats don't look good, but I think I see a clear difference in how they're performing and how they're getting open compared to last year. So honestly, my confidence is pretty high. I would go an 8 in the wide receivers.
Yeah, for me, I would go with a 7 in my ranking. There definitely is more potential in this receiver room than we've seen recently at Utah. 100%. But it still is a little too early for me to say that, like, oh, this is like a much improved receiving core or anything. And some of that's due to the quarterback, of course. But I'm going to go with a solid 7.
Yeah, I agree with Landon. 7 seems appropriate for me. Nothing really to add outside your guys' points. Hit it spot on, truthfully.
Yeah. Okay, let's talk a little bit about the tight ends. A group that it's hard to put a grade on them because they clearly haven't been utilized effectively in the game plan. Nate really just isn't the kind of quarterback that really is going to hit tight ends that often, I think. He's just a very
Mm-hmm.
different style from Cam and Bryson. And obviously, Keithy is injured, the best tight end in the room. So for me, I'm gonna go 4 simply because I would go 5, but I'm gonna go 4 simply because of some of the blocking issues that we've seen when they've
Mm-hmm.
been either run blocking or pass protecting. So 5 was average, but I will go 1 down and give him 4.
Yeah, so for me, the tight end room without Keithy, I'm giving a 1. With Keithy, I would give it a 9.
Yeah,
But
he
so
makes that big of a
currently,
difference.
currently right now it's a 1 for me. The run block's been abysmal. Missing Logan Kendall has actually been enormous.
Yeah,
Neither
much bigger than I
Yasmin,
thought.
yes, neither Yasmin nor Landon King have shown any ability to block whatsoever, I would say. And both have
Yeah,
actually actively made losing plays. Yasmin
yeah,
had a
the
bad drop. Landon King had that touchdown he kind of gave up. Good pass by Nate. And just neither of them, no one in the tight end group has made a play this season yet.
Yeah, the Dallin Bentley injury, he was supposed to be a really good run blocking tight end, has actually affected us a lot
Yeah.
more than I think people thought, because Dallin Bentley obviously hasn't played for Utah before, but he was supposed to factor in heavily and he's been injured. And he was kind of going to be the Logan Kendall of this year. And so we kind of
Yeah.
need him back.
It's crazy to say, but I think Utah might need to get to the point where we stop using tight ends until Keithy's back. It might be
Because,
worth
yeah,
running an extra receiver or lineman out there, to be completely
yeah.
real with you. I'm
Because,
just
like,
not seeing the upside.
why would we put like Suga Taraga out there or
That dude sucks.
Yasmin when we could play both Pittman and Mikey Matthews, right?
Yeah.
Like they're just better
I mean,
players
or
than
have
those
better
guys
pass
are.
protection and bring in another
Yeah,
offensive lineman. When teams have
yeah.
done that against Utah, it's worked out extremely well
Oh,
for them.
they've killed us. Like Ohio State in that Rose Bowl,
Yes,
bringing in an extra
we
blocker.
got destroyed.
We couldn't get
stopped
any
them the
pressure.
first 2 drives, and then they scored every single drive the rest of the game after that.
But
After
that
they made
means you
that
need to be
switch.
willing. That means you need to be willing to throw down the field, which we clearly aren't. You know, for whatever reason, we do not throw down the field, even with Cam.
Yeah, I
I
mean,
mean,
it
to
could
talk
potentially
about
help in the run game.
to talk about tight end help, I mean, we heard Kyle Whittingham in the coach's interview with Bill Riley talk about Lander Barton playing
Yeah,
both sides of the ball. I don't know
we
if it's
need
gonna
him.
happen this year, but I mean, at least helping on with the blocking. I mean, Lander Barton is massive. The dude
Huge.
is a
Yeah.
freak of nature. I mean, he reminds me a lot of how what's his Cole Fotheringham played for Utah. I mean, the dude is just built to be a freight train.
Barton's
I mean,
definitely faster than a Fotheringham was, though.
well, agreed, but like the role, I think the role he would play is that freight train, create a huge hole against the defensive end for JaQuindon and Glover and company to go for 20 yards instead of
Yeah.
10.
One other thing I want to talk about in relation to the tight ends is I was hoping that Landon King would have a little bit more of an impact
I agreed.
because he just
I
looks
agree.
insanely big and fast. Like I
huge.
think he could be a huge mismatch if he gets that sorted out.
I'm
And
a
I mean
little...
the fact that he's played already and that the coaches trust him to at least get on the field, I think for me is a good sign. So I think
he's
he'll
a
figure it
soft-
out.
He's a sophomore, right? He has quite a lot of years of eligibility left. I think
Yeah, he does.
by this time next year, the dude could be a freak of nature. I think he has a lot of potential. Him, McLean, and Mikey Matthews. We have a bright future for the pass catchers at Utah if everything works out.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move on to the defensive line. This unit obviously is by far the most injured unit on the team. I mean, we've barely seen Tafuna. We haven't seen Peppa at all. We haven't seen Connor O'Toole at all.
Arguably our 3 best defensive linemen.
Arguably our 3
not
best
even really
defensive
arguably.
linemen.
Not-
They
yeah,
are
it's
our
the-
best 3
They are our
defensive
best
linemen.
3, yeah.
I don't know who you're arguing for.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know. Like, I guess Ellis is pretty freaking good, but like,
Jonah
even
Ellis
Witt
is
said
really
Connor
good this
O'Toole
year.
was better than Ellis
Yeah.
was. But yeah, I definitely think missing 3 out of your 4 best defensive linemen and still performing this well gives me confidence, even though it can't be a 10 simply because of injuries. So
Yeah.
I have to drop it to like an 8 because of injuries.
Yeah, I was
I
going to go
mean-
8 as well. I like that ranking a lot because it does seem like these defensive linemen are going to come back and be relatively healthy. None of them have been ruled out for the season or anything. So it's seeming like we could be getting like maybe a mid-season surge even at defensive line. So I'm going to go with a 7.
I got to go with a 9 here, man. And just to give a rating about the tight ends, I forgot to do that. I give him a 5.
Gotcha.
But with the defensive linemen, man, I have to give them a freaking 9. They've played out of their
Yeah.
minds against teams that very well could have rushed for way more. I mean, Weber State again. It's Weber State FCS. Baylor looked lifeless outside of 2 or 3 drives, but Florida State probably a top 5 running back room in the country, holding that team
I would
to
say
13
top 2,
yards.
dude.
Yeah, you know, I mean, I can't go off the top of my head. Like top 2's probably they could be the best.
I would say only behind maybe Michigan, to be honest with
Yeah.
you.
Yeah, Florida's got some dudes back there. Montreal Johnson and Trevor Etienne are
dude, did
awesome.
I just have to interject. Did you see that breakaway run by Trevor Etienne
He's so
against
good,
Tennessee?
dude.
Yeah.
Oh my
He's
God.
so good.
That
The
was
dude's a
special.
sophomore.
Yeah,
The dude's
The
a
guy
sophomore.
had
He's
his
insane.
hands on him, and he was so fast and strong, he just pulled away anyways.
yeah.
And then the guy that before, he didn't wrap up, he just hit him, and it barely moved him. I've never seen anything like it.
He's
He's so
really
good.
freaking good. And the
I have
fact that
never
we
seen
held them
anything
to
like
13
it.
yards, unbelievable.
Yeah.
13 yards without our best three guys. I mean,
Mhm.
I got to give them a 9. I mean, my expectations coming in with the injuries was pretty low. I'm not big on Van Villinger. I mean, at least on the edge. I think as a tackle, he's pretty
He could
good.
do better, yeah.
He can do better, but we'll see. I think the emergence of Jonah Ellis this year, I think he's played excellent. I mean,
Yeah.
he created a lot of pressure, and he was able
2
to
sacks against Florida.
wrap up against guys that we've always had struggle at the beginning of the year. I love it,
Yeah.
man. He was a big reason why the next group has been so dominant.
Yeah, the D line lived up to my expectations for a healthy D line. And the
Mhm.
only reason they're not a 10 out of 10 for me is just the injuries.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
like like if we had our whole healthy D line, this like how they performed so far would have been basically how I expected them to perform. Maybe a little bit better against Baylor, but still it was pretty dang close for the injuries that we had. Okay, let's talk about the safeties, which
Cool.
I think
Best
we're all
safety
going to
group
have
in
a
the
pretty
country.
high
Yeah.
ranking.
This is easy.
Um, yeah, for me, Cole Bishop and Sione Vaki are one of the best duos in the country. I think they are both insane playmakers. They're both insane ball hawks, very athletic, very sure tacklers. The only very, very slight reservation I have is that neither of them is really like a true drop back free safety. So like we are a little bit vulnerable over the top, which is why my ranking would be a 9, which I think is really high, but there's just that one slight reservation with them. Everything else is elite.
There's not a better tackling safety in the country than Cole Bishop.
Yeah.
I mean, he can create pressure, make a swim move on a left tackle, and bounce out and cover a screen all within 10 seconds. He is so dynamic. He is everywhere. I mean, I as the season started, I do not think there's a better safety in the country than Cole Bishop right now. I'm a little biased. Obviously, I've seen every single game for Utah. I haven't seen every single game for every single team in the country. But what I've seen, he's better than Caleb Bullock. He's better than, honestly, that's the only a guy I can come on top of my head that's been getting a lot of hype. So he's better than Shiloh Sanders.
Definitely. Shiloh isn't that good.
You got a pick 6, bro. What are you talking about?
And then to talk about Sione Vaki, I've been really impressed with his coverage. I mean, there's still a lot to be desired there, but he was able to hold his own against Ricky Pearsall when they went 1-on-1 in that Florida game. He kind of took out the Weber State, Baylor's number 1 guy whenever he helped out with Vaughn in battle. So
What's your ranking?
I do agree with you though. Like there's still some things to be desired, especially in deep coverage.
Yeah, I just think
gotta
they're
give it
burned with too many deep plays for me to give them a 10.
Yeah, I got to give him a 9. If they can clean up a little bit there, especially against guys like Washington, Oregon, and USC, a 10 is going to be my end of season ranking for sure.
Yeah, for me right now, I have Utah safeties at a 10 in confidence. I think Sione Vaki is a lot better in pass protection than you guys are giving him credit. He even had that interception, which is
we're not saying
awesome.
they're bad. We're just saying that
I'm
the
just saying I
fact that
think
they're
he's an
so
elite pass
good by the
protector.
line, the fact that they're so good by the line makes it so they suffer a bit with deep passes. Does that make
I would
sense?
say that's just more stylistically though than like a confidence meter. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I can agree with that.
I think like in terms of confidence, I think if we need them to drop back and defend the pass, I think they can do that incredibly. And I also think that the way they're currently being used, where they do defend the pass as well, but they also come in with some creative blitzes, they're closer line of scrimmage. I think it's a 10. I mean, they've exceeded every expectation I have.
I'd really like for us to have a third safety that can be more of that coverage guy that we could do 3 safety looks, kind of like we did last year, to, get Cole Bishop near the line of scrimmage and we can still play cover 2, or Sione Vaki in the box and we can still play cover 2, or something like that,
Yeah.
so that we're not so vulnerable.
A quick question about like safeties. Like, this is just me being ignorant to like how the position rankings or position groupings are. Would the nickelback be in that safety spot as well?
Vaki played a lot of like nickel safety hybrid last year, but nickel is more of like the inside corner.
Yeah, nickel
Typically,
really just means like third corner, kind of.
yeah,
It's like your
so
third corner.
yeah,
So
so
I wanted to
similar.
bring up.
it's
I wanted
kind
to
of a
bring up-
hybrid position because sometimes the nickel will cover a tight end where they don't always have like a receiver, and sometimes the nickel and zone will take deep third coverage. But yeah, like it's not exactly a safety; it's a little different.
To kind of bring up your point with the third safety, he's been playing nickel, so I'm not going to talk about him a lot. We'll talk about him later. But Teo Johnson, I think you can do that for Utah, that third safety spot.
Yeah, I wonder if Jonathan Hall could potentially, or Nate Ritchie maybe, could play in 3 safety looks as well. I'd like to see that coming forward. I really would like to see the 3 safety look, because I think especially in 2021, that was one of our best looks, was
I
the
agree.
3 safety look. Okay, let's talk about the linebackers. Obviously, Lander Barton, pictured, unbelievable talent, has had a really strong year. I think that not Diabate, sorry, Demooney. I was thinking of last year.
He's back.
I think Demooney has been really solid as well. I think he kind of had a little bit of a bad first half against Florida, but he's our leading tackler on the team. He seems really strong in run stop, especially. I've noticed him making a ton of tackles that have prevented good runs from the other team. So honestly, and obviously Karene Reed nursing a little bit of a head injury, but honestly, very confident in the linebackers. I would probably give them a 9. Simply just Karene Reed's health, and maybe they're not as strong in pass coverage as they could be.
Yeah, I'm going with a 9 as well. I think we have a really well-balanced and athletic room. I think Barton, he can defend the pass and the run at an extremely high level. Demooney, I've noticed, he makes a very noticeable impact in the run game. He's a physical backer. He's strong. And then Karene Reed, I've noticed, he's very good at reading the field and reading the quarterback's eyes, and he can get in a lot of passing lanes. So I think that trio, I'm really confident in them, honestly. If we lose a game, I don't think it's going to be because of linebackers, so I'm giving that a 9.
Truthfully, like even with Karene Reed's health, I got to give these guys a 10. They've exceeded any expectation I've ever had. I mean, my expectations were high. I mean, outside of Demooney maybe having some struggles against the quickness of Florida,
Struggles, though. They scored, they had 13
They had
rushing
11
yards.
points. Yeah, they had
I'm
11
just
points.
like
11.
he was lined up against the slot receivers, the elite speeds of Florida. He
Yeah,
struggled.
that was just scrambling when Karene Reed was injured.
It was just that one he was lined up against the tight end that totally fooled him on the corner route, and then the one against the slot receiver for a big gain. It was really 2 plays in coverage that kind of screwed him in that one.
Yeah, I think that's his personnel. He's not a coverage back. He's not a coverage linebacker. And Lander Barton going out to fill that role while Reed was out completely exceeded my expectations. He's made some plays out there. Obviously, the pick 6 last week against Weber. I mean, as soon as Karene Reed gets back, I'm confident that this linebacker room can hang with anybody. And then we got guys on the bench like Justin Medlock. I mean, the dude's a freak of nature. He's a beast.
Yeah, if he can get healthy, for sure. And Sione Fotu deserves a shout out here. He played really well against Florida. Yeah.
I'm shocked we haven't seen more of him.
Yeah. Yeah, so one thing I will say is I think that run defense is a lot better than last year, because I think Demooney is a better run defender than Diabate was, and he kind of slotted into that spot. Diabate was maybe better in coverage and more athletic and maybe a little bit more of a playmaker, but Demooney, I think, has been so solid. He reads the field so well because he's a graduate transfer, so he's been playing football forever. He just knows where plays are going, where to be. He's never in the wrong position, and it's such a nice luxury to have.
When he doesn't have those wrapping up woes that Diabate had last year.
Yeah. When he hits you, you go down.
Season. I think Lander Barton, he reminds me a lot of like 2020, 2019 Devin Lloyd. I
Yeah.
mean, he still has some rawer moments, but he has all the skill sets to be one of the best linebackers, if not the best linebacker in the country in the near future.
Yeah. Okay, let's talk about the last position group, the cornerbacks. This one for me is a little worrying. I think that people underestimated how much losing our elite number one guy, Clark Phillips, would hurt us. I was not one of those people. I was very worried about that loss, but I was told I was crazy a lot of the time. But I think we're seeing some of the fears realize where we don't really have that number one guy, and where we're struggling a little bit, I think, as far as cornerbacks go. We're letting people get behind us. We're not being able to stick super well in man coverage. We're not zone sound, assignment sound. Yeah, what do you guys think about the cornerbacks so far?
I mean, no one's really like torn us up through the air or anything. We
Yeah, but it's
obviously we
like
haven't
we
played a
haven't
passing
played that
offense
elite of
like
passing
that.
offense. Yeah.
There's been a couple concerning slips that I definitely hope were just like rocky road to start. That play at the end of Baylor, that's
Ooh,
almost inexcusable.
it is
Like that's
inexcusable. You
almost bad
cannot
enough
have
to
that
be
happen.
benched the next week. That's just
You can't
I
have that
don't know
happen.
what you're seeing as a player there. Who cares if they get a 30-yard completion? Like that was
Miles
the last play of the game. It genuinely
Miles
doesn't matter.
Battle is too experienced to let that happen to him. And
Yeah,
I'm sure he got chewed out, but yeah.
we'll see. I
I
mean, I
mean,
really like Zamiah Vaughn so far. He's been beat one or two times, but that happens to everyone. It even happened to Clark. He did have a really nice interception though against Baylor. Very
Yeah.
nice catch, went out for it. I think for me, I'm gonna give them a 6 because we haven't played someone that's really tested them yet and they've shown a bit of weakness. But I do think they have the potential to be a pretty solid room.
I was someone that was really, really high on the corners coming into the year. I'm a firm believer in Zamiah Bond being a cornerback one. I still am, um, but they have dropped a little bit for me. I think the idea of them not being tested is very concerning, especially with how good the passing offenses are in the Pac-12 this year. But I do think they have the athleticism and the skill set to still be very good. I give them about a 6 here. It dropped quite a few. I think it's just the fact that um, the lack of the experience of a cornerback one is showing, and then
Yeah.
some of the mistakes that some of these veteran guys are doing are concerning, especially with like a Miles Battle. But
Yeah.
Teo Johnson, what I've seen from him, he's completely exceeded my expectations, especially transitioning to a defensive back. I think he was a wide receiver last year. He's shown that the dude is ball hawk. He's everywhere. He's really shined for me. So I
Yeah.
think if he can continue to um, jump my expectations, it the cornerback room can continue to improve and I live up to my early season preseason expectations.
Yeah, he's one of the dudes that I wanted to shout out as well because he just looks so instinctual. He's incredibly fast. He moves so well. And I think that the mistakes he's had have just been lack of defensive reps. You know, sometimes he'll just go into someone with his shoulder instead of wrapping up, which will be quickly fixed in Utah. I think by the end of the year, he may be our best coverage corner. That might be my prediction because he's just so fast and so good on his feet. And so I'll go a 5 overall for the confidence level. I'm a little less confident than you guys, but I still think that hopefully the mistakes are fixable, but
Yeah.
we'll see. Big test at UCLA this week. Okay. So let's jump into our UCLA game preview here. So let's jump in. This is the previous game last year. Obviously, Utes went to the Rose Bowl in Pasadena, lost by 10. The score to me is a little deceiving. I don't think Utah was really even that close, to be honest with you. They kind of made a lot of mistakes. They didn't play well. UCLA, I felt like, kind of dominated them physically and had a lot of big plays. Um, So yeah, what were you guys' thoughts on the game last year?
This is really interesting looking at this again with fresh eyes from last season. We had more first downs than them by a significant margin, which is very odd. Very, very strange. We converted the third down pretty well. Our total yards weren't really lacking behind. Our passing yards weren't really lacking behind. Our rushing yards weren't really lacking behind. But we did have 2 turnovers, and they even had more penalties than us. I don't
Yeah,
know. This is
it was
kind
the
of
big plays that killed us.
yeah. This is kind
The
of
big plays.
confusing to look at it. Like if you had blocked out the score and the obvious stuff like touchdowns and everything, I mean, and more time of possession by a not like insignificant margin. I don't know. That's a very, very strange loss to me looking back at it. It doesn't seem like we made very many big errors other than obviously just those explosive plays.
The 0 of 2 on fourth down was killer
Yeah,
as
both
well.
red zone, I believe.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
just Utah struggles away from home last year are something that I can't say are gone because obviously we've only played one game away and it was against injured and pretty lackluster Baylor team.
We played terrible in that game as
Yeah,
well.
Yeah.
yeah.
It's
But
atrocious.
again, it's such an interesting because it's so hard for me to kind of compare, like think about this season and think like, oh, that's what we're gonna be like. Like our offensive woes, is that gonna be the same when Cam Rising comes into this game and completely changes everything, or if Brant Keithy can play? You know, I mean, obviously one or two guys aren't gonna change everything, but these two guys are probably the most important players to the team's success. But like my thoughts about last year's game, like I think Tanner hit it right on the head of the nail. Like the big plays. You look at Loya, or for USC, I can't ever say his name, but one reception, 70-yard touchdown. That's this. They had like 3 of those last year.
Well, I
It's
mean,
gonna kill
literally
them.
look at Charbonnet's stat line. Like that's like an
Yeah.
absurd stat line. You know,
That's
like he was like doing chunk run after chunk run after
Yeah, I mean,
chunk
averaging
run.
nearly 10 yards a carry by yourself.
And in the red
That's just-
zone,
come on.
and in the red zone, we couldn't stop DTR and Bobo. DTR would find Bobo in the end zone every
Mhm.
single time they were in the red zone. Yeah. I don't did we even stop them on one drive in the second half? Look, they scored 28 points in the second half.
Yeah,
Like that's
I
an
don't think we
embarrassing defensive
did.
performance. Maybe the pick six only, but you know, the pick six
That was
only made it
garbage
look like a
time, to be
respectable
honest.
game.
That was
Oh, I mean,
garbage time.
they were up 42-25. The game was completely over. And then we got a pick six that
Yeah.
made it look a little more respectable. But yeah, a pretty terrible game. I think that the team is definitely going to be looking for revenge and kind of to redeem themselves from an awful performance last year.
Agreed.
I also think this UCLA team isn't as dynamic or as good as they were last year. And then them coming to Rice Eccles, it's going to be a different game, but they're still very scary. So
Yeah. Let's talk about some of the players to watch from UCLA. Obviously, their best player is Liatu Latu, defense. He plays defensive end, and he is just a total game wrecker. He's their best defensive player they've had in a long time. He's been pretty much unblockable so far, 3 weeks in. He's been good in the run game. He's been elite at getting to the quarterback in the pass game. He's someone that we have to keep a huge eye out on, I
Yeah.
think.
I'm really worried about Latu because we don't have the personnel right now to give him the Thibodeau treatment like we did to Oregon a couple years ago. We don't have that Logan Kendall or even a Brant Keithy or Kincaid actually handled Thibodeau pretty well. And then we don't
Especially
have,
fathering him, too.
yeah, fathering him really wore him down. And then we also had Mekhi Bernard, our best pass blocker, who's put some very, very quality blocks on people who have broken through that first level. We don't have any of those guys we just named this year. And edge blocking with the tight end and Jaquindon's basically useless in the pass block from what we've seen. I'm really worried about he could have 4 or 5 sacks by himself if everything goes wrong, I think.
Yeah, especially coming off that side of the line with Logan Fano or no,
Yeah.
Spencer Fano on it, true freshman.
That's a big ask.
We have to be able to. We're gonna have to double him. We're gonna have to
Yes.
chip him. We're gonna have to cut block him. We're gonna have to do something to try to slow him down.
Yeah, I mean, someone like Jalen Glover he's gonna need to step up in the pass block. Like whatever
Yeah.
it takes to keep him from reaching the quarterback, he's gonna need to step up and do that.
I mean, we might need Chris Curry a lot just with his
Yeah,
experience in seeing elite edge rushers. We might
exactly.
need
Someone that's
Curry
not
in
gonna
to play a
be
lot.
afraid.
Yeah, someone that's done it, has experience, knows where to
Yeah,
be, what to do, especially if Cam doesn't play, because
yeah,
that's going to be a tough matchup for Nate Johnson, I
yeah,
think.
exactly.
I do want to say though, like they haven't faced. I mean, like I know we talked about the offensive line just recently, and we're not as high as on them as we were previous to start the year. But UCLA has not played a team that is remotely close to Utah on the offensive line. I mean, probably close to Carolina as their best opponent offense for that respective respective position, and Utah clears them 10-1. You know
Yeah,
what I mean? So I do agree that he is going to be a problem, and we have to watch out for them all day. But I do think that if there's a team that they have played so far this year that can handle them, it is Utah's offensive line.
Okay, let's move on to Dante Moore. This is their very dangerous true freshman, 5-star QB, highest rated quarterback to ever commit to UCLA. So far this year, he has 7 TDs to 1 interception, and I think he's just looked unbelievably good. Um, I know this is slanderous, but he reminds me of kind of like early career
mm,
CJ Stroud at Ohio State, um, where Stroud maybe, you could see the raw talent there, but maybe wasn't exactly what he would become in the future. His throwing motion reminds me a lot of it. How the ball comes out of his hands reminds me a lot of it. How soft it drops into his receiver's hands does. Yeah, I'm really scared to play Dante Moore. I think that he is an elite talent. I'm hoping that we caught him early enough that we can really rattle him with the Rice Eccles stadium and maybe kind of make it like a Jaden Daniels true freshman kind of experience for him. What are your guys' thoughts
I'm
on
not as
Moore?
worried about Dante Moore as you are. If you remember at the beginning of this season, he hadn't even won the position outright. He was splitting time with Garbers and Schlee, actually. So that shows me that he wasn't leaps and bounds better than anyone else in the room. And I don't think they've played even a remotely good defensive team yet. So I'll need to see it against a better team before I really buy into the hype. He does look promising 100%. But I mean, their coaches even come out and said if he's playing bad, he doesn't have the position 100% locked up even as starting quarterback.
Yeah, I think Landon hit on the head. I think if we can get pressure on him, he could struggle. Utah has played a lot of quarterbacks this year that once they get hit once or twice and get some pressure in their face, they have struggled, which allowed um, the great corners and safeties to make some plays. But the thing is, Utah hasn't been able to get to the quarterback as consistently as we hoped. And so I think, like Tanner brought up too, I think if Rice Eccles is as loud as we hope and as loud as it probably will be, and if we can get some pressure on him, he could have a rough day. But if he can handle that pressure, he can be very dangerous. He has a lot of skill, a lot of talent, and I'm hoping that he can't handle that pressure, so Utah gets a nice easy dub.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about their receiver, J. Michael Sturdivant. Cal transfer, their best receiver, insane speed, one of the fastest receivers in the entire country. He already has 220 receiving yards this year, 2 touchdowns, and he's averaging 24.3 yards per reception,
That's
which is just
ridiculous.
that's just an insane number. Like that's just unbelievably like a good number right there. So yeah, I think this guy, especially with kind of I've stated my concerns with maybe we haven't defended the deep pass as well as I would have hoped. This is a guy that scares me, a guy that could get behind the defense and really cause Utah some trouble on Saturday.
Yeah, I'm a bit worried about Sturdivant as well. If you look at our track record against elite receivers, it doesn't look good. You think of Jackson Smith Najigba, you think of Marvin Harrison, you think of Taj Washington, you think of those receivers USC had. We won those 2 games against USC, but they had a hell of a night. And I don't know if we
Yeah.
have the offense to be able to overcome something like that.
So we need to cover this guy well, is what
We
you're saying.
do. That's what I mean. We're gonna try.
I mean, we probably just need to put Teo Johnson on this guy, just our fastest,
Yeah, we need
just our
someone
fastest
that
guy.
can stay with him, even if he's a little bit raw. We just can't
Yeah.
let a guy get beat by like 10 yards and they're just off to the races.
Yeah.
I mean, I'd be 100% fine just constantly having Vaki or Johnson just kind of be that number 2, who else is on him. You know what I mean? I
Yeah.
think he just reminds me a lot of Jaden Addison
Jordan.
for US. Jordan. Jaden? Who else? Jaden Addison. Jordan Addison. For USC last year, and like Landon said, we had a lot of trouble with him. So
Yeah.
it's
Two
concerning.
people.
It's concerning.
Yeah, 2 other impact players I want to mention really quick are their running backs, Harden and Steele. They've been
Yeah.
really dominant so far. They're averaging like 8 yards per carry on the ground so far this season against, like pretty bad competition, but still they look
concerning though.
still concerning. So I just wanted to shout them out as well. I think that they're also dangerous and that stopping the run is going to be really key in this game, I think.
Yeah, I mean, UCLA has one of the most explosive rush offenses in the entire country. And being honest, that's what lost us the game last year at the Rose Bowl. So,
Yeah. Okay, let's move on. So we're going to go to keys to the game. So for Utah, the keys are win the turnover battle, pressure more, limit big plays, and play aggressively. And for UCLA, it's dominate the line of scrimmage, test the DBs, and limit penalties. What are your guys' thoughts on these keys?
yeah, so I was actually listening to a UCLA podcast earlier today, and they were kind of breaking down how lopsidedly Utah has won the turnover battle in their matchups with UCLA. And it's why we had that huge win streak where like the 2015 to 2021 win
Yeah, I
streak
think it was
against
like 6 in a
UCLA.
row. Yeah.
Yeah, it was like 8-1 in the last 9 games against UCLA. And they actually broke down that it's because Utah has scored a defensive touchdown in almost every single one of those games, and UCLA is yet to score a defensive touchdown against Utah in their last 9 matchups.
Wow.
So that's a stat to think about. We have
Yeah, so
Very
win the
barely,
turnover
bro.
battle is key for Utah.
and I think they've only turned us over 3 times compared to like 10 times for Utah. We've turned them over. So it's
Yeah,
been
I mean, we had
extremely
2 last
lopsided.
year, and that's why we
Yes.
lost, probably. We
Yeah.
had 2 fourth down stops, and then we had a fumble and a pick. So that's 4 turnovers
Yeah.
overall, which was not
So
good for Utah.
I think that the turnover battle is a really nice key because just looking historically, we've beaten UCLA off turnovers many times. It's not like, oh, maybe it's going to impact the game. It's like, no, I think a large reason why we generally have done well against UCLA is the turnover battle.
And it's made games that may have looked close look like blowouts.
Exactly.
I think we kind of talked about a little bit with Dante Moore when we were kind of talking about him, but I think pressuring more is probably one of the bigger keys for Utah as well. He hasn't played in as a hostile environment like the Rice-Eccles Stadium before, and if guys like Jonah Ellis and Lander Barton can get to him, it's going to be pretty hard for him to handle that pressure.
Yeah. Something that I wanted to talk about was one of UCLA's keys, testing the DBs. I think that UCLA needs to make Utah prove that they fix their issues with receivers getting behind them. They need to make Utah prove that. Because if Utah can't prove that, then UCLA is going to have a field day. If Utah hasn't fixed that problem, UCLA is going to get hit multiple shots over the top that are probably going to go for touchdowns.
Yeah, and I want to focus on dominate the line of scrimmage for UCLA. I think if UCLA, even if they don't hit those other 2, if they really hit dominate the line of scrimmage, I don't really see Utah winning this game. Because at that point, where's Utah's advantage? If they can't at least push the line of scrimmage, I mean, it's like dude, I just don't see a good path for Utah to win without at least having a push at the line of scrimmage.
Yeah.
I mean, Utah's got to go out there and show those puny Big Ten offensive lines that they can't hang with us,
Dude,
bro.
UCLA's O-line is probably like the second biggest in the pack. I won't even lie to you. Those guys are huge.
I mean,
It's
I
actually
agree.
crazy.
I mean, they moved
They
us
were
pretty easy last year. They
they were
moved us so
mhm.
easy.
They're one of the
Well, they
best
would
run
clear out
push
one
units.
side. They would clear out one entire side, and then they would just run counters where they like we were
Yes.
10 yards off. They pushed us to the left 10 yards, and we couldn't do anything.
Unbelievable.
Yeah,
I
Yeah, they're
mean,
one of the best run push units in the entire country.
it's a
UCLA
completely different year, baby. We got this.
I hope it's a
UCLA
different unit,
runs
dude.
a lot of that wide zone that Utah struggled with. Um, Games historically that we've lost, like the San Diego State game, or games that we struggled to like contain runners, like the Baylor game for a couple series, they ran wide zone. That was hard for our, that was really moving our defensive line
Yeah.
quite far, which has shown to be a weakness of ours. So hopefully we can limit that and have another really strong day against the run.
Ditto.
One other thing I want to talk about here is playing aggressively. Utah, as we've talked about, has been incredibly vanilla and incredibly conservative so far this year. I just don't think that's going to fly against UCLA. You're going to need to score points to beat UCLA. I don't think you can
Agreed.
score I don't think you can score 21, 24 and really expect to beat UCLA. I think you're going to need to put up 30 plus to beat UCLA.
Agreed.
Okay, let's move on to the next thing. So here are our predictions. So for me, I'm predicting a Utah win 31-28. Really close. I think that UCLA is going to have some success offensively. But I do think that Utah is going to win the turnover battle. They're going to rattle Dante Moore enough to get enough mistakes that they can pull off the really, really, really tight win at Rice Eccles and keep the win streak going.
I got Utah with a win as well, 27-17. I think our defense is really strong this year. And I think the pressure that Moore is going to experience with the home crowd and our defensive line is going to create some mistakes that they're not going to be able to we're going to be able to capitalize on. I just believe that like the coaching staff would have to make some adjustments, especially with the deep pass. This is a perfect, I guess, test run with some schemes before we play Washington and USC, who will look to do that all day long. So, 27-17, big Utah win.
I've got Utah on this one. Just Utah's an extremely strong home team. I don't even know how to explain it. The difference in games away and home is just insane, especially against quality teams. I do respect UCLA a lot this year. I just think Utah's barely going to edge them out, most likely due to UCLA mistakes like shooting themselves in the foot with penalties, turnovers, and other mismanagement type of things potentially. I do think Utah squeaks out a close one.
Yeah. Yeah, overall, I think we're picking Utah to win. It's just hard to pick against that home win streak.
It is.
If this was on the road, I definitely would not be picking Utah, just
I
with
might pick
all of their
UCLA
question
by 2
marks.
scores on the road. Believe it
Yeah,
or not.
I think that this would be a clear UCLA lane if it was on the road. But yeah, so hopefully Utah can get through this game, and then they've got another tough game against Oregon State on a really short
Yeah.
week. It's going to be a big challenge. So crucial 2 weeks coming up for Utah here, I think.
Who do you guys think is going to be the big standout player for Utah this week?
I'm going to go Money Parks. I think he's going to
Love
catch
it.
2 TD passes this week.
Ooh,
I think
from
the
Nate or
standout
Cam?
there is
From
going to be
Cam.
Cameron James Rising. I
Yeah?
think he plays, and I think he looks pretty good. I really believe that.
What do you think, Ethan?
Give me Cole. No, give me Cole Bishop. No. Zamai Vaughn. Give me Zamai Vaughn. Gonna be on. I don't know how to say the dude's name if I'm gonna be honest. They're wide receiver 1. I have a really hard time with names. I mix them up all the time. Sturdivant. Yeah. I think he's gonna be on him all day, and I think Zamai Vaughn's gonna be able to lock him up. His game might not jump out on the stat sheets. He might not get a pick. He might not get a pass breakup, but I feel like he's going to be able to really hold his own against a very quick and very good wide receiver in Sturdivant, and he's going to help Utah close the gap in that big passing game that UCLA and Chip Kelly are looking to do.
Okay. Anything else, guys, or should we wrap up there?
It's all from me.
Okay.
Go Utes,
Well,
baby.
thank you all for listening. Please like and subscribe on the video. We are also on Spotify now. Keep a lookout for more videos we post in the future, and go Utes!